Well, good day, true crime enthusiasts. It's Mike from Profiling Evil, coming to you from the heart of the Australian outback, where the sun scorches the red earth behind me and the wind carries a sharp scent of heat-baked dirt. Over my shoulders, you'll see some little pillars sticking up. They really caught my attention. These are ant beds. And so if I start jumping around, it's because I've stepped in the wrong place. But I'm in one of the most remote places on earth, surrounded by dry creek beds and thousands of pesky flies. Now, one creek bed caught my attention though, and it got me thinking about one of the most tragic cases where human assumption collided catastrophically with reality. It's one of Australia's most fascinating and frankly tragic examples in the disappearance of 9-week-old Azaria Chamberlain at the Uluru in 1980. Now you'll probably remember the soundbite, "The dingo ate my baby." Hey, welcome to Profiling Evil. I'm here in the Australian outback. I'm working on a 4-episode serial killer documentary that's going to drop around the end of the year. Now in the background you can hear the noise and the sounds of parrots. This is just incredible. In fact, I walked in to get ready to shoot this video and came across hundreds of parrots. It was an incredible sight. And by the way, on this documentary, I hope you'll start watching for it because we've uncovered some powerful new evidence that might definitively name the killer in these cases. Now, in the meantime, hit that like and subscribe button and share Profiling Evil with your friends. And please give us a thumbs up. It truly does help our videos get attention. Now, I want to talk about the death of Azaria Chamberlain. She was 8 or 9 weeks old, if I remember correctly, the baby of Lindy and Michael Chamberlain. Her death occurred near Ayers Rock. It's a remote place in the middle of Australia. Now, if any of you have been to the Red Rocks of Zion National Park or down into the southwest corner of Utah where there's the Snow Canyon Parkway, you've seen areas that look a whole lot like Ayers Rock. I spent quite a bit of time there years ago working with the Northern Territory Police on a couple of different initiatives. I've hiked all the way around Uluru Rock in the early morning hours before the heat and the flies stopped my progress. Now, I have heard that it's said that Ayers Rock has more flies per square inch than anywhere in the world, and I can attest to it. But I'm going to be exploring this case about this little girl a little more in detail, and I'm going to try to focus more on human psychology. I want to talk a little bit about the investigative errors that went on and how law intersected to nearly ruin an innocent family's lives. Lindy Chamberlain, the mother, was born in New Zealand back in 1948. She had a meticulous, structured upbringing in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, where her father served as the pastor. Now, he moved the family around quite frequently, instilling discipline and an attention to detail. Lindy met Michael Chamberlain, a fellow Adventist pastor, and the two married in 1969. Now, they moved around in Australia as well, where they started their family while balancing church obligations and a growing little business that Lindy ran. She had a small dressmaking business, and media reports suggest that her personality was methodical, precise, and deeply moral. Now, this would later factor into how authorities, in my opinion, jurors, and the media interpreted her behavior during the unfolding crisis that happened. You see, on August 16, 1980, the Chamberlains traveled out to Uluru for a family camping trip. Now, it should have been a straightforward holiday, but it quickly turned into a nightmare. One night during their stay, the little 2-month-old baby, Azaria, vanished from the family tent. Now, Lindy claimed that she stepped away only for a few moments, and when she returned, she saw a dingo emerging from the tent with the baby in its jaws. Now, think of a dingo as Australia's wild dog. I mean, this thing is lean, it's fast, and it's cunning. It's perfectly built to hunt small to medium animals, and while attacks on humans are extremely rare, this is a predator that's capable of taking a baby. And that's exactly why the disappearance of Azaria Chamberlain shocked the nation. Now, Lindy, upon seeing that dingo carrying her baby off, screamed for her husband, and immediately everyone in the campsite started searching for the baby. In the hours that passed, investigators found the baby's blood-stained jumpsuit near a campsite, but not finding the body. The absence of the body actually complicates the investigation quite a bit. And another thing happens in these kinds of investigations when there's no human body. Human behavior starts to take over. Because without a body, we're all quick to search for an agent of action. The who's responsible for this, or what's responsible for this. And herein lies a central theme of the Chamberlain case. Humans are wired to impose narrative structure on incomplete evidence. It's just what we do. We often bend facts to fit our own expectations. And early investigative efforts leaned heavily on assumptions rather than strict forensic analysis. The initial coroner's inquest in 1980 concluded that a dingo was responsible. But soon after, public sentiment, media scrutiny, and the inherent biases of the investigators and the forensic experts began to shift this narrative. By the second inquest, Lindy's version of events was viewed with skepticism by everyone who was hearing it. The prosecution presented a series of forensic claims, including supposed blood evidence in the family car. And I want you to remember this because it's really important. Part of the reason she was convicted is because of what police say was blood evidence in the car. Now, there was also damage to that jumpsuit, and it was argued to be human inflicted by the prosecution. Now, a scientist who later had his work discredited, quite frankly, testified in support of these claims, arguing that a human could have staged the entire scene, transported clothing, and misled authorities. In other words, could have staged the crime scene. Now, this science relied heavily on the conjecture and circumstantial inference that they were making rather than reproducible empirical methods. So to clarify what an inquest is in Australia, I wanted to just kind of help you with this little thing. It's a formal judicial investigation into certain types of deaths, particularly those that are sudden, unexpected, or suspicious. It's not a criminal trial, but it is designed to establish the facts surrounding a death. And here's how it works. First, the victim. They have to be identified along with possible reasons why they experienced death. So was it an accident? Was it suicide? Was it a homicide? Or was it natural causes? The coroner is a judicial officer in Australia, and they specialize in these death investigations. So they might interview witnesses, including police officers and medical experts, and the family members. They thoroughly examine forensic reports and other documentation. And when the thing's complete, the coroner will issue findings about the cause and the circumstances of the death. So during the inquest, Lindy's demeanor became a focal point. Observers noted that she was too calm in their opinion, too composed during police interviews, and she remained calm and composed during media interviews, and that contrasted with societal expectations of overt grief. And think about it yourself, if that would be troubling to you. Now, jurors, perhaps conditioned by cultural scripts about how mothers should act in the face of such a child loss like this, interpreted her behavior as suspicious. And this is a critical behavioral insight because humans, unconsciously measure other people's responses against expectations on their own, or the way in which they would react to events. So when somebody deviates from what they think they should be acting like, even if it's for benign reasons, doubt starts to rise. Now in Lindy's case, adherence to her religious upbringing, personal resilience, and logical problem-solving styles misaligned with public expectations. And this unintentionally incriminated her in a court of public opinion, and possibly incriminated her in front of the judge. Now, the forensic evidence in this case also seems really problematic to me. The bloodstains in the family car that I talked about, they were cited as proof of foul play. Yet later, analysis proved that these substances were more likely a chemical compound that was used in the soundproofing of the car. The jumpsuit, remember, the prosecution's argument was that it had to have been caused by a human, not an animal. And that required, in the defense, somehow interpreting the dingo's behavior and its physical capabilities, which they didn't do very well at the trial. Now, at the time, experts lacked consensus on what a dingo acts like. Witnesses reported seeing wild dingoes carrying small prey and domestic animals, but the translation of this evidence to behavior of carrying a human infant was just too controversial for everyone. In essence, the Chamberlain case illustrated how ambiguous forensic evidence can be weaponized when human bias infiltrates interpretation. So, media influence amplified these biases. And within days, newspapers and televisions were broadcasting all kinds of information filled with ridicule and speculative narratives. The phrase, "the dingo ate my baby," became a mocking meme, reinforcing Lindy's perceived guilt. Cognitive psychology tells us that repetition in the media can solidify beliefs that we have. People believe what's easiest to recall, not necessarily what's accurate. And the jurors were exposed to this kind of coverage, and they faced immense pressure to reconcile this public sentiment that was going on with the courtroom evidence, a dynamic that still is relevant in contemporary high-profile cases that we talk about on this channel. Well, hey folks, this is a heavy topic, and I want to just pause for a moment and ask the question about whether you find the disappearance of this child to be shocking. Because there's so much more to uncover about human assumptions, investigative bias, and flawed forensic methods, the kind of things that almost destroyed this family. So I want to just point you to my new book, Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. In the book, I dive into cases just like this one, showing how appearances can deceive and how narratives can be weaponized against the innocent. Through the book Wolves in Sheep's Clothing, you'll learn about behavioral misinterpretation. Things like how Lindy Chamberlain's calm composure was misread as guilt, or how early police forensic assumptions from that blood evidence in the car to the jumpsuit damage led authorities astray, and how it fueled a wrongful conviction, and how repeated catchphrases like "the dingo ate my baby" shaped public opinion, turning a natural tragedy into a national spectacle. Wolves in Sheep's Clothing isn't just a book, folks. It provides lessons in critical thinking, such as how to weigh evidence against narrative pressure, how to question authority claims, and how to recognize when circumstantial evidence is being misrepresented. It's a toolkit for understanding how miscarriages of justice like this happen, and how to see through some of the deception, whether in the courtroom, in the media, or in your own daily assumptions. Now, the Chamberlain case is a vivid example of what might seem obvious at first glance could in reality be entirely wrong once you dig deeper. So if you want to better understand why truth is often layered, why it's complex and elusive, and why human perception can be as dangerous as any predator, check out and purchase Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. You can get signed copies delivered for free anywhere in the United States by visiting profilingevil.com. Anywhere else in the world, including Australia, you can get Wolves in Sheep's Clothing through Amazon. So grab your copy and explore the hidden patterns behind crime, perception, and deception. Hey, thanks for listening to that part, but let's get back to this case. The trial began back in 1982, and it resulted in the murder conviction of Lindy, the mother. The husband, Michael, was convicted as an accessory after the fact. And to make their determination, the court relied heavily on this circumstantial evidence and, frankly, disputed forensic evidence. So timing discrepancies, interpretation of the blood evidence, assumptions about what maternal behavior should be like were all leveraged to construct a plausible but ultimately flawed narrative of guilt. And the convictions demonstrate how human desire for closure, combined with selective evidence interpretation, can override objectivity. Lindy was put in prison just before the birth of another child. She had that baby in prison, and then that child was taken away from her as she was sent back to prison. Well, the Chamberlains immediately appealed, but their efforts initially failed. However, in 1986, 4 years later, a breakthrough occurred when searchers looking for a lost hiker near Uluru discovered what would prove to be Azaria's jacket. It was found near a dingo lair, partially buried, but consistent with Lindy's original account of what the infant was wearing. This finding provided tangible, physical corroboration that supported the dingo theory, and it subsequently led to the Chamberlains being exonerated by a 1988 Supreme Court. Well, this case has proven to be a powerful study in forensics, legal and social error, and it illustrates how circumstantial evidence, media influence, and cultural biases can converge. Behavioral analysis in the case can offer several lessons to us, though. First and foremost, investigators and jurors are susceptible to confirmation bias, particularly under time pressures and emotional stress. Now, once a theory starts gaining traction, whether it's a murder or an accident, subsequent evidence is filtered to support the theory. In other words, it goes back to that same comment I've made 100 times, quoted by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle in the Sherlock Holmes series. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data, because insensibly, they spend all their time twisting facts to meet their theory, instead of allowing the facts to develop the theory. Now, the second reason is cultural expectations around grief and emotion can bias interpretations of behavior. So we have to remember that. Third, media amplification can distort public perceptions, and it can subtly pressure legal actors to conform. These insights remain critical in understanding modern miscarriages of justice worldwide, whether it's here in Australia, in Europe, or in the United States. The Chamberlain case caused all of us and the judicial system to evolve, highlighting the need for rigorous chain of custody procedures, for standardized testing, for protocols that stay in line and are followed, and of course, peer review of expert testimony. In the courtroom, behavioral cues and the demeanor were weaponized against the Chamberlains. Lindy's composure that was once interpreted as callousness was in fact a coping mechanism, and it aligned with her upbringing and her logical problem-solving style. But jurors unconsciously equated her calmness with guilt, revealing how behavioral misinterpretations can skew verdicts. Modern legal psychology studies confirm this bias, showing that perceived effect and cultural conformity can influence jury decision-making more than simply evidence alone. So take a moment and think about how you would have responded if you were a juror in this case. How would you respond to what you witness in testimony by people, the news reports that you're watching, or witness statements you hear about in true crime cases? Are you basing your decisions on emotion or evidence? For the Chamberlains, even after exoneration came, they continue to face ongoing scrutiny and social stigma. This highlights the long-term impact of wrongful convictions, extending way beyond legal resolution. I mean, there's social ostracism, reputational damage, and psychological trauma underscoring the human cost of investigative and judicial errors. So I hope that this review and examination of the Chamberlain case down under in Australia can help you gain a multidimensional understanding of how we can see these miscarriages of justice happen. Circumstantial evidence, when interpreted under bias and media pressure, can create a narrative so compelling that it almost convinces the world of a false reality. And it's demonstrative of the potential for big mistakes. You know, driving down this desolate highway past red rock formations and the vast horizon has caused me to reflect on the broader lessons for those of us in the true crime community. We, like sworn investigators who handle these cases, have to remain objective, and we need to remain cognizant of the power of narrative framing. Forensic evidence is only as reliable as the methodology and the interpretation behind it. And behavioral clues must be analyzed in context, not assumed as universal markers of guilt. And they need to be examined in totality, not alone. And whether we like it or not, we've got to accept the fact that sometimes tragedies happen. They can be random and inexplicable. And this isn't me agreeing with a Lori Daybell, by the way. This is just the facts. There's no need to always find a human villain in these cases. The Chamberlain case remains an enduring study in human cognition, in investigative errors, and legal evolution. It kind of reminds us that truth is often complex, elusive, and layered, requiring patience and skepticism and a willingness to challenge initial assumptions. So whether it's a crime that originates in a small tent in Uluru, Australia, or it's happening in a courtroom battle that extends over decades, this story illustrates that justice isn't merely about evidence. It's about perceptions, interpretations, and the slow, deliberate uncovering of the truth. And I'd really like your thoughts on this matter. Because if you were on the jury, I'd like to know how you would have interpreted this mother's calm and composed behavior after that child, a 2-month-old child, disappeared. Would you think she's innocent and that she's coping? Or would you be suspicious of her behavior because she's not acting the way that you think she should have acted? And do you think the media played too large of a role in shaping public perception about this case? Think about it. The dingo ate my baby. And finally, could this tragedy have been prevented if investigators had questioned their assumptions and their biases from the start, corroborated everything before they jumped? I hope you'll put your comments down below, and please weigh in on what others have to say. And next time you encounter a high-profile disappearance case or a media frenzy, or you see a case that just seems so obvious at first glance that you pause for just a moment and you think, wait a minute, did the dingo just eat the baby? Hey folks, thanks for listening to Profiling Evil in this episode. Please make sure that you're hitting that like and subscribe button and that you've got notifications turned on so that you don't miss a single episode. And if you like what you're getting through Profiling Evil, share us with your friends. And please feel free to copy the links to this video and share them on your social media. And watch for us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you like to get your true crime on the go, check out Profiling Evil's audio podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're one of those folks that are looking for a little more information, visit the profilingevil.com website where you can check out our interactive story maps, our global missing persons and unsolved homicides map. And keep in mind, you can enter your own cases onto that map, and you can look at our other true crime content. And while you're there, folks, please check out our books. You can check out my book, Deceived. It's about the ultimate takedown of a religious cult that was abusing children. That thing is powerful, and the proceeds are going toward law enforcement efforts. I'm not keeping any of that money. You can also check out my book, She Knew No Fear, which is the story of the murder of my great-great-grandmother in 1891, and how I solved her murder 130 years later. So from the beautiful outback of Australia, thanks for supporting Profiling Evil. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.